thought I ended it that night when the facility burned. The screams, the fire, the snow turning black, everything I'd been running from, gone in flames. But I was wrong. Evil doesn't die in fire. It learns to survive it. For months, I kept moving from one town to another, changing my name every time someone looked at me too long. I thought I was safe. But 2 weeks ago, I heard a voice through a broken radio. It said my real name, my real one, Liana Hart. If you're alive, they're coming. That's when I realized the war I thought I ended was only beginning. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe and comment where you're watching from. You're going to want to hear this one. It's been 6 months since the explosion at Station 12. The world calls it an industrial disaster. They say a faulty reactor caused the blast. But I know the truth because I lit the match myself. I live off the grid now, deep in the northern forests where no signal reaches easily. The air smells like pine and snow, and the nights stretch forever. I stay in an old cabin that used to belong to a ranger who disappeared years ago. I fixed the roof, patched the windows, and wired a shortwave radio that barely works when the wind is calm. It's not much, but it's quiet. Every night, I sit by the radio and listen. Most channels are static, but sometimes faint voices break through. People trading coded messages, numbers, or distress calls. I write them all down, hoping one of them will lead me somewhere. A few nights ago, something strange came through the frequency. 3 short bursts, too long, the same pattern my mother used when she wanted me to know it was her. The message was distorted, but one line came through clearly, for her eyes only. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed awake until dawn, replaying it again and again, trying to make sense of it. My mother's dead. At least, I think she is. So, who sent that message? I packed what little I had and left the cabin before sunrise. The world outside was white and silent, covered in snow that sparkled under the early light. I walked for miles until I reached the nearest town, a small cluster of wooden houses and a single fuel station. The attendant there looked at me like I was a ghost. Maybe, in some ways, I am. He told me there was an old airfield a few miles north that sometimes picked up strange signals from the mountains. No one went near it anymore because of the soldiers that used to guard it. That was all I needed to hear. When I reached the airfield, the sky was heavy with clouds. The runway was cracked, weeds growing through it, and the control tower leaned like it had given up standing years ago. I expected silence. Instead, I saw movement, shadows slipping between the hangars. I hid behind a broken fence and watched as 3 figures approached, their faces covered with scarves against the cold. One of them carried a portable transmitter, the kind only, used by people who know how to stay invisible. Liana Hart, the tallest one said, his voice muffled but clear. "We've been waiting a long time for you." I froze. My first thought was to run, but then I saw the symbol stitched onto his jacket, a spiral, crossed through with red paint. The same symbol that was on the note slipped under my door months ago. I lowered my guard a little. "Who are you?" I asked. A woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp and tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "We're what's left of the people your mother tried to save," she said. "We call ourselves the Resistance." For a second, I couldn't speak. The word felt like something out of another life. A life before blood tests, before laboratories, before the fire. The woman introduced herself as Tessa Ward, a former Helix medic who escaped after realizing what they were doing to the test subjects. "Helix isn't gone," she said. "You hurt them, but you didn't kill them. They've scattered, changed names, changed faces, but the same people are pulling the strings." I wanted to argue, but deep down, I already knew it was true. The world doesn't erase evil. It just gives it a new name. Tessa handed me a small device, about the size of a coin. When I touched it, a projection appeared above it, a map filled with blinking red dots. "Each one of these," she said, "is a facility just like Station 12. I stared at the glowing dots, each one a reminder that everything I destroyed was only one piece of something much larger. My mother's work, my blood, all of it was still out there. Tessa looked at me and said, "You can keep running, or you can help us end this for good." I took a slow breath. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I looked at the map again. Every instinct in me screamed to stay hidden, to survive. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Not after everything they'd taken. I met her eyes and said, "Tell me where to start." The air inside the hangar felt heavy, thick with cold and secrets. I followed Tessa through narrow metal corridors lined with flickering lights and rusted equipment. Every few feet, I saw faces staring back, people who looked like they'd been running for years. Some wore bandages. Some carried guns. All of them carried the same haunted look I saw in my own reflection. Tessa led me into what used to be a control room. The windows were shattered, snow covering the floor, but in the center stood a table surrounded by makeshift computers and scattered files. She pulled a sheet of paper from a folder and slid it toward me. It was a medical report. My name was at the top. Under it, lines of data. Cell replication rate, 142%. Genetic variation detected. Helix strain confirmed. I felt my stomach tighten. "Where did you get this?" "From a Helix drop site near Anchorage," she said. "They've been selling it. Your blood, your DNA, everything. They're calling it the Eden serum." My heart skipped. Selling it? To who? Whoever can afford it. She turned on a screen, and footage appeared, grainy but clear enough to see. A man in a luxury penthouse injected himself with a glowing blue liquid. Within seconds, his wrinkles vanished. His posture straightened. He laughed into the mirror like he'd been reborn. The camera shifted to another clip. An emergency room. The same man was convulsing, his veins turning black. He died within minutes. "They promised eternal life," Tessa said quietly, but all it did was rot them from the inside. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. "That's not my blood. It can't be." "It is," she said. "They harvested it before Station 12 fell. You didn't just destroy a lab, Liana. You destroyed their main supplier. Now they're desperate. They're experimenting with unstable versions, trying to rebuild what they lost." I stepped back, my breath shallow. "So people are dying because of me?" Tessa shook her head firmly. "No, they're dying because of them. You're not the monster here. They are. You're the proof they can't control." I wanted to believe her, but guilt burned through me. Every drop of my blood they used felt like another chain I'd never break. My mother's dream of saving humanity had turned into a marketplace for death. Tessa handed me a small vial of blue liquid, the same kind from the footage. "We recovered this 2 days ago," she said. "It's real. Unstable, but real. We ran tests. It carries your genetic code." I held it up to the light. It shimmered faintly, just like the vial my mother once kept locked in her drawer when I was a child. "She created it to heal," I whispered. "Not for this." Tessa nodded. "That's why we need you. Helix has gone underground, splitting into new branches. One of them, Novagene, is operating out of an abandoned mining facility in Alaska. They're mass-producing this serum. If we don't stop them, it won't be just the rich buying it. It'll hit the black market, soldiers, militias, anyone with power." The room fell silent. I looked around at the tired faces of the people who had risked everything to be here. They weren't soldiers or heroes. They were survivors, just like me. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Tessa's eyes met mine. "Not your blood, your knowledge. You've seen how they work. You know their systems, their protocols. You can help us destroy the source." I wanted to say yes right then, but the image of Ethan's face flashed through my mind. The last time I saw him before the explosion, the sound of his voice telling me to run, the guilt, the loss, the endless running, it all came crashing back. "What if I make it worse?" I asked. "What if I lead them right to you?" Tessa stepped closer, her voice steady. "You already did. They've been tracking your signal since the night you turned that radio on. But that's exactly why we found you first." Her words hit hard. My blood ran cold. "You mean they know I'm here?" She nodded. "Probably. But we've masked the signal. For now." "For now," echoed in my head like a ticking clock. I looked down at the vial again, watching the blue liquid swirl slowly. My whole life had been about escaping, running from what I was, from what they made me. But the truth was clear now. There was no running anymore. The only way out was through. I placed the vial back on the table and said, "Then we stop them. All of them." A small smile tugged at the corner of Tessa's mouth. Good, because we've already found our first target. She unfolded a map and pointed to a red circle marked deep within the mountains. That's where Novagene is rebuilding their lab. They think it's hidden, but we have a way in. I stared at the map, the weight of my choice settling in my chest. The fear was still there, but something stronger pushed it down. Anger, purpose, resolve. For the first time since Station 12, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. And this time, I wasn't alone. The next morning, the hangar buzzed with low voices and quiet determination. People packed gear, loaded trucks, and studied maps spread across the tables. For the first time in years, I felt something that almost felt like belonging. These weren't soldiers or scientists. They were people who had lost everything to the same enemy. Tessa handed me a headset and pointed to a smaller group gathered near the back. "That's your team. We move at dawn." I nodded and joined them. There were 4 of us. Tessa, a wiry mechanic named Jonah, who could fix anything with wires and tape, a quiet ex-soldier named Ray, and me. Our mission was to intercept a Novagene convoy traveling through the Alaskan mountains. We believed it was carrying Helix data, blueprints for rebuilding the Eden serum. If we captured it, we'd know exactly where the remaining labs were. The plan was simple on paper: ambush, recover, vanish. But nothing involving Helix ever stayed simple. We left before sunrise in an old armored truck disguised as a supply hauler. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling every sound but the crunch of our tires. Inside, the air was cold and smelled faintly of metal and fuel. Tessa drove while Ray scanned the frequencies for enemy chatter. Jonah sat beside me, checking the drone feed. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, my hand resting on the small knife hidden in my sleeve. Hours passed in tense silence until Ray's voice cut through. "Got movement. 4 vehicles approaching from the east. Same route, same time frame." Tessa's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "That's them." We parked on a ridge overlooking a narrow pass. The convoy appeared below, black trucks with tinted windows, tires crunching through the snow. Their headlights cut through the fog like searchlights. "Positions," Tessa ordered. Jonah launched a small drone that dropped an EMP charge onto the lead vehicle. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was enough. The truck skidded sideways, blocking the road. The others halted instantly. Our team moved fast. Ray and I slid down the ridge, weapons drawn. I didn't think. I just acted. The cold bit into my skin as I smashed the back window of the nearest truck and climbed inside. What I saw made my breath stop. It wasn't data. It was people. Rows of metal crates filled the cargo hold, each one with a small window and a blinking monitor. Inside the first crate was a young woman, barely 20, unconscious, hooked to tubes. Her veins glowed faint blue under her skin. I moved to the next crate and saw a child, maybe 10 years old, her small hand pressed weakly against the glass. The same faint blue shimmer traced through her veins. Ray climbed in behind me, stunned. "What the hell is this?" "They're using live carriers," I said, my voice trembling. "They're testing the serum inside them." I turned to the nearest control panel and saw a list of subjects labeled Eden Batch 13A. At the bottom, a name froze me completely. Heart, Liana sequence modified. I leaned closer, heart hammering. "They're cloning my genome." Before Ray could respond, one of the crates hissed open. A small girl tumbled out, coughing and gasping for air. Her hair was dark like mine, her skin pale, but it was her hand that stopped me cold. A small crescent-shaped scar on her wrist, in the exact same place as mine. She looked up at me with frightened eyes and whispered, "Mom said you'd come." My body went still. "What did you just say?" "She told me to wait for you." Her voice shook. "She said you'd take me home." I didn't know what to say. Every logical thought collapsed under the weight of that single sentence. My mother was dead. How could this child know her? Gunfire erupted outside, snapping me back to reality. Ray shouted, "We've been spotted!" I grabbed the girl and shielded her as bullets shattered the truck's windows. "Tessa, we've got civilians. Children, pull back." Her voice crackled through the headset. "Negative, we can't leave them." But we were outnumbered. More Novagene vehicles appeared on the ridge. their lights cutting through the snow like blades. Jonah yelled that the EMPs were down and reinforcements were closing fast. I turned to the girl. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly. "Then stay close." We slipped out the side of the truck and ran toward the tree line as bullets tore through the snow around us. Ray covered us, returning fire, while Tessa drove the truck forward to block the road. The mountains echoed with chaos. Engines, gunfire, shouts. The resistance fought like cornered wolves. When we reached the forest edge, I knelt beside the girl, trying to calm her shaking. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Arya." The name hit something deep inside me. My mother once mentioned that name in her recordings. Her prototype child, the perfect carrier of the cure. I looked at the scar again and finally understood. Arya wasn't a coincidence. She was part of me. Tessa's voice came through the headset again. "We can't hold them off much longer. Get to the extraction point." I lifted Arya into my arms and started running toward the ridge. Behind me, the trucks exploded one by one, the sky filling with smoke and fire. By the time we reached the evac truck, my legs were numb, my lungs burning. We sped away as the mountain behind us lit up in flames. Tessa's hands shook on the wheel. Ray was bleeding but alive. Jonah sat silent, staring out the window. No one spoke for miles. Arya leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "She said you'd protect me." I looked down at her, my heart breaking and racing at the same time. "Who said that?" "Your mom," she said softly. "She's not gone." The words echoed in my chest like thunder. My mother was alive, or at least she had been when Arya was created. Everything I thought I knew shattered in that moment. The mission wasn't just about stopping Helix anymore. It was about finding her. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for family. The snow was falling again by the time we reached the Resistance's secondary hideout, an abandoned communications outpost buried beneath the mountains. The place was cold and dark, but it was safe, for now. We laid Arya on a cot near the fire, and she slept instantly, her breathing slow and uneven. I sat beside her, brushing the snow from her hair, still trying to process what she'd said. My mother, alive. Tessa came in quietly and handed me a cup of coffee. "She hasn't spoken since we left," she said. "She's scared," I replied. "She's been through hell." "So have you," Tessa said. Then, softer, "You did good out there." But I couldn't take the compliment. My mind was stuck on one thought. If my mother was alive, then everything I thought I ended at Station 12 was far from over. Helix had always been one step ahead, and now it made sense why. They were using my mother's knowledge, maybe even her cooperation. By nightfall, the others gathered around a large map projected on the wall. Tessa briefed us on what we learned from the convoy's computers. The files contained detailed transport logs, lab data, and encrypted communication between high-ranking members of Nova Gene. There was one message that stood out. It was marked, "From R. Cole." My stomach turned. Rowan Cole, my mother's old partner, the man who'd helped me once, the man I trusted. He'd vanished after the attack. I thought he was dead. "He's alive," I said quietly. Tessa nodded. "More than that. He's leading them now." The room fell silent. Jonah broke it. "So the man helping us was one of them all along." Tessa looked at me. "You knew him better than any of us. Could he have betrayed us?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already there, heavy in my chest. Rowan had always believed in controlling the cure, not destroying it. To him, my blood wasn't a burden. It was a key. We traced his location to a site deep in the Yukon wilderness, marked as Project Dawn. It was listed as a data storage facility, but the transmission records told a different story. Massive energy spikes, encrypted communication bursts every hour. It wasn't storage. It was development. Tessa looked around the room. "If we want to end this, we hit that site and we take him down. Once and for all." No one disagreed. Before dawn, we loaded up 2 trucks and headed north. The roads were buried under snow, the wind slicing across the windshield. Every mile felt heavier than the last. Arya sat beside me, bundled in a thick coat, her small hands clutching a locket she said belonged to my mother. Inside, it was a photo. My mother holding a baby, Arya. My throat tightened. When we reached the edge of the compound, the scale of it hit me. Floodlights carved through the dark, illuminating rows of steel towers. Drones patrolled the sky, their red lights blinking like eyes. It looked like a city of ghosts, quiet, mechanical, and alive. Tessa gave the signal. Jonah launched an EMP drone while Ray and I moved toward the entrance. The power cut instantly, plunging the facility into darkness. We slipped inside through a maintenance door and crept down the hallway. The walls hummed faintly, powered by backup generators. We followed the map until we reached the central lab. My heart stopped when I saw what was inside. Rows of cryogenic pods lined the room, each one containing someone who looked like me, or Arya. Clones, hundreds of them. Ray whispered, "What is this place?" I stepped closer, reading the label on one of the pods. Genesis Prototype 2.0. "They're rebuilding the program," I said, "and they're using my mother to do it." A voice echoed through the room. "She always said you were clever, Liana." I turned. Rowan stood near the control panel, his white coat spotless, his face calm. "You look just like her when you're angry," he said with a faint smile. Tessa raised her weapon. "Step away from the console." Rowan didn't move. "Do you even understand what she was trying to do? Your mother wanted to end disease, end suffering, but the world wasn't ready, so we had to make it ready." "You're killing people," I said, my voice shaking. He looked almost sad. "Sacrifice is how evolution works." He pressed a button and alarms blared through the lab. Pods began opening one by one, steam filling the air. The clones started to move, slowly at first, then faster, their eyes glowing faint blue. Tessa fired first. Chaos erupted. The clones charged, their movements too precise, too strong. Ray threw a grenade, the explosion shaking the floor. Jonah shouted through the radio that reinforcements were arriving. We were outnumbered and out of time. Rowan moved toward the exit. I ran after him, tackling him near the console. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I pinned him down. "Where is she?" I shouted. "Where's my mother?" He smiled through bloodied teeth. "Closer than you think." Then he pressed a small device in his hand. The control panel behind us exploded. The floor shook, glass shattered, and a wall of fire roared through the room. Tessa grabbed Arya and yelled, "Go, now!" I pulled free from Rowan's grasp, choking on smoke. "You're coming with me," I shouted. He laughed weakly. "You can't save her. She doesn't want to be saved." The ceiling collapsed before I could answer. I dragged myself up, grabbed Arya, and ran. The heat burned my lungs as we sprinted through the corridors. Explosions followed us, one after another, until the night outside swallowed the building whole. When we reached the trucks, the entire facility was engulfed in flames. Tessa was covered in soot, Jonah limping beside her. Ray didn't make it out. Arya clung to me, crying quietly. In her locket, the photo flickered, an electronic chip beneath the image blinking faintly, a tracking signal, a message. I looked at Tessa. "She's alive," I whispered. "My mother's alive." Tessa stared at me through the smoke. "Then that's where we go next." Behind us, the sky glowed orange as the last of Project Dawn collapsed into fire. But in that burning light, one truth was clear. This war wasn't over. It was only changing shape. And for the first time, I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was fighting to find her. The storm didn't stop for 3 days. The snow came down in waves, burying the blackened ruins of Project Dawn until nothing but smoke rose through the frozen air. We waited in silence at the edge of the valley, watching the fire slowly die. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. The weight of what we had lost said everything. When the last embers faded, Tessa turned away first. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "We need to move," she said. "Helix will come looking for survivors." We left the wreck behind and drove north through the endless white. The truck engine groaned under the cold, and every few miles I caught myself looking back, expecting to see drones rising through the smoke. But the sky stayed quiet. Arya slept most of the trip, curled under my coat. She looked peaceful, though every time the truck hit a bump, she whispered something under her breath. Once, I leaned closer and caught it. Mom said not to be afraid. Her voice broke something inside me. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to be brave anymore, that she was safe now, but the truth stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure if any of us were. When we finally reached an old ranger station at the edge of the wilderness, we decided to stop. The building was falling apart, but it had walls, a roof, and a fireplace. We made it ours. Tessa tended to Jonah's leg, wrapping it in cloth torn from her own jacket. I gathered wood and tried to focus on the small crackle of the fire instead of the chaos still echoing in my head. Later that night, when everyone had fallen asleep, I sat outside. The stars were sharp and endless, and the air so cold it burned my lungs. I took out Arya's locket and studied the faint blinking light beneath the photo. It wasn't just a tracker. When I pried it open, a tiny microchip slid out, no bigger than a fingernail. Inside it was a single file, a voice recording. I hesitated, then pressed play. "Liana," my mother's voice said, "if you're hearing this, then Rowan found me. I couldn't stop him, but I did what I had to. You were always stronger than me. You'll understand soon." Her voice cracked slightly, then steadied. "Arya is the key now. Protect her. She carries the final sequence, your sequence. They'll come for her, but if you keep her safe, you can end all of this. Don't hate me for what I did. It was the only way to keep you alive." The message ended, leaving nothing but static and the sound of the wind. I sat there for a long time, the cold biting my hands, my heart twisting between anger and relief. She was alive. My mother had built all of this, the cure, the clones, even Arya, to give humanity one last chance. But in doing so, she'd given Helix everything they needed to play God. When the firelight flickered behind me, I turned and saw Tessa standing in the doorway. "You heard something, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "My mother's alive, and she left a trail." Tessa stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Then that's our next mission." I shook my head. "Not yet. We can't run into this blind. Helix will expect it." She studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "You've changed. You're not the same woman I met at that airfield." "I don't think I ever was," I said. For a brief second, the two of us just stood there, the snow swirling between us. She smiled faintly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start again." Inside, Arya was awake. She was sitting by the fire, her eyes reflecting the light like mirrors. "Did she talk to you?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes." "What did she say?" I crouched beside her and brushed her hair away from her face. "She said you're special, and that I have to protect you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we'll protect each other." That simple promise felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. The next morning, we buried the fallen, the ones we'd lost at Project Dawn. Ray's name was carved into a wooden plank, placed on a small hill overlooking the frozen valley. Tessa said a few words. Jonah stood silently with his head bowed, and Arya clutched my hand the whole time. When it was over, I stood apart from the others, staring out into the horizon. Somewhere beyond those mountains, my mother was still alive. Somewhere, Helix was rebuilding again. The fire we thought we'd put out was still burning, quietly, patiently. Tessa walked up beside me. "We'll need to regroup," she said. "New people are reaching out, small pockets of survivors. They're scared, but they're ready to fight." I looked down at Arya, who was tracing patterns in the snow with her boot. "They'll keep coming for her," I said. "Then we make sure they don't find her," Tessa replied. I turned toward her. "No, we make sure they don't have anywhere left to hide." She studied me for a moment, and then nodded. "Then let's give them a reason to be afraid." The plan formed that night. We would rebuild the resistance, not as a scattered group of survivors, but as a force, a movement. We would find Helix's leaders, expose their operations, and bring their empire down piece by piece. For the first time, I didn't feel like a fugitive. I felt like a weapon finally aimed in the right direction. As dawn broke, the light spilled across the snow, soft and golden. Arya stood beside me, holding the locket tight in her hand. "Do you think she'll find us?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "We'll find her." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of smoke and pine. Behind us, the old station creaked in the cold. but ahead lay endless miles of untouched white, a clean slate, waiting for what came next. I took one last look at the horizon, then whispered, "It's not over, Mom. Not yet, because the world may have forgotten who I am, but I haven't forgotten what they did, and I'm not running anymore." To everyone watching, if you've been following this journey, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The next chapter begins soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the hunted finally becomes the hunter.